Hello and welcome to Dell's Gaming. I'm Dell and this is From the Depths, and we are on a little basic fort actually in the campaign. I just wanted to go through some of the resource items in the campaign that I've seen and found, and what the implications are for people which are continuing a campaign like I am myself with the new localized resource patches, and some of the bits are yet to look into fully, but what the implications are, and then possibly, hopefully, how it might change. This is just ideas for the future when we start a new campaign. So first of all, as you can see on the map, I'm in one of my first little campaign areas. Now, an interesting one is the Steel Striders are doing a pillaging resources all the way back to this resource point here. Now, that's a good sign in that it shows that they are willing to go a long distance to try and remove or interdict your resources, which is excellent idea. It'd be nice actually if they didn't have this long line, I think long term, where they'll suddenly appear on your flank. So if they're not in visual range, or you only see the line when they are in visual range, which admittedly they are at this moment. So because I can see them, I know where they're heading to, but theoretically I wouldn't know where he's heading to. So shouldn't we turn that off until it's closer? And we wouldn't know until he's gone all the way through here and he starts travelling down and you go, oh drat, he's heading for my resource point. Could be a option possibly for you know, would be nice if it was an option to say show enemy paths in the future. Turn it on and off as a possibly an option to make things easier for you. Now I've got some battles. I'm not going to save this campaign. This is just to show you some of the bits I've found. So first thing, at the moment these resource points haven't got any raw resource boxes on them. Now one thing you'll notice, and I saw it, if I go over the different zones, the values down in the bottom left hand corner change. Now at the moment let's take this as our static version. You'll see the crystal at 130,826, lots of crystal. Now if I go over this resource point, which is a crystal producing resource point, you'll see the value has gone up. So I'm guessing that's due to resources which are in this zone that it's actually calculating and adding to our general pot. I'm guessing at that. If I go to a different zone, I see the values as they are now, and if I start going into that zone, you'll notice that the natural's gone up, metal's gone up. Let's see, what else was there? Natural and metal. And if I look at the resource zone, it's mainly natural, metal and some crystal. Oh yeah, crystal goes up as well. So it seems to be going up in general on that zone. So everything that this resource point, if I can go and find it, which I can't at the moment, you can see that it's building up natural, metal and crystal in this resource point because it hasn't got any collection containers for it. So it's sort of building it up in this resource zone for collection, I'm guessing. Next is, if we look at our resource point here, bring it back on the thing. If I just build a couple of resource containers, so we'll just do some a natural and a metal, an oil, a scrap and a crystal. So that's given us 2,000 resources of each, and now they're quite happily filling up from our resource zone. And if I go back to come off of build mode and go back to here, we'll notice that the resource points on here, the resource values are going up, but they only go as far as the 10,000. Sorry, 1,000, 10,000. So each of those boxes contains 10,000 of the resources, and this resource zone gives a little bit of everything because it's a good resource zone. It's a starter resource zone, so a trace crystal, but everything else. The other areas So if we look at this, we can see that I think because we're in the zone, the value's not changing. You see how the central value's not gone up in any way. 137164. If we zoom in, we can see the resource values for this are now all set at that 20,000 value. And the values are not going up. So let's just see what happens, just as a test. If I put onto this resource zone, so this one here, which is only producing crystal, and at the moment has 33,000. So we're going to go in here, and let's make sure it is this one. Is it that one? It might not be. Bear with me. Let me just go and get myself to this fort and make sure I'm in the right fort. So I'm on the right fort now. And if I go back here and just look at our values, see we've got some values here of crystal at 33,551 in this point. So now if I put a resource crystal on here, container, let's go and find a crystal, just a small one. That's filling up pretty quickly. And if I come out of build mode, and here again, whoops, daisy, come on. One thing that I noticed is, where's all that 33,000 crystal gone? Because we're now down to 6,000 and it will stop at 10,000. So has it reduced? Or is it now been added part of the overall base? If I put, the other interesting bit is if I put one of the other, if we look at the values that are on here, and I'm going to put some other resource containers down. Let's put a scrap, a large scrap one, so we can see a good change in scrap. So our scrap at the moment is 24.8 million, so it's 14926. I'll have to ignore that battle. So 14926. Now our scrap is now going up. But it's like, where was the scrap coming from? So it's got to be coming from that what was in the resource point being dropped into that resource point earlier, if that makes sense. So the main bit here is your items not being lost. I'm going to ignore this battle up here for this moment, so do forgive me. So it's basically pulling the resources from everything that's being effectively sucked up by the various items and dumped into that area, which is good in some ways. So the other part of this is, what if we've got a not on the resource area? Now what I have set up here, I'm just going to take that resource fort out of play on this Navarone base just to have a bit of fun, is some metal container with 1.7 million metal containment, which is almost all of the metal, and you can see it's quite happily filling up gradually. So this is filling up from somewhere, this 1.7 million metal. Now if we come out of here, bear with me, just takes a little while just to come out of there, you'll notice that our actual metal pool, when we're in this zone, is actually going down. If I come out of the area, so the area itself has 1.87 million, which is most probably the pool plus its local resources. When I move out, you can see our general resources is going down, and that's, for want of a better word, our central pool of items. So that's steadily gone down, which means that this must be pulling in from our central resources, which is good. It means, you know, you don't lose everything, but everything has to get transferred into these boxes. Okay, now I was pulled into this little battle with the Steel Striders with our battle cruiser force, and a very interesting item is that because I haven't sorted out the resources, you can see we're not firing. Now, we're not firing because this vessel has no ammo. He has no ammo because although he has got ammo producers, he has no metal to create the ammo, so he's only running with what is in ammo barrels. If I was to give him some ammo barrels, which is obviously a little bit dangerous on the surface, but we'll just do it just for... we'll put it somewhere safe. Let's put it down in the front, shall we? And you'll notice I have put some metal resources down here, but if I go to ammo barrels, he will produce a bit more fire. A little bit more, because the ammo barrels will start producing a bit of ammo. And will shoot as they reload. But if you've got vessels relying on ammo producers, because he has no metal, and if I go down to the metal blocks down here, where are you? You're in here somewhere. There's the metal. It's not gathering anything. So, whilst in battle, this ship is not able to gather any metal to supply its ammo producers. Well, not until it destroys something. And the same happened for the missile firing ships, etc. Because there's no ammo being produced, they have stopped firing, quite simply. And the other one, he's got plenty of fuel, luckily, at the moment. Although he has suddenly stopped for some reason. Yep, he has stopped. Which is interesting issue, and I can only put it down to oil, possibly. No, he's got plenty of fuel, but he has suddenly stopped. No, plenty of fuel's not the issue, but he has now decided to stop moving, which is nice and interesting for it as well. So anyway, there's seems to be a few little issues. So resources are what I would need is a ship in this fleet giving resources to these vessels. You can see they've all seemed to have sort of come to a bit of a halt now. The enemy fleet ships as well have also stopped moving. You can see he's obviously run out, or something's happened to stop him now being able to do anything. Our aircraft, well, these have docked, which is alright, but our artillery ship has stopped. Over here, have we got any movement? He's grounded anyway. We've got one here he's trying to fly by the looks of it, or he's trying to fly in some way, but not totally successful. They do have fuel, but they don't seem to be moving. This one is still moving, which is interesting. He's still going around, and he's got a bit of ammo to be able to transfer and I guess fire occasionally. Yeah, so as you can see, this is some of the problems with not having local resources available to you. I think what the problem may be at the moment, there's no local oil for these ships to use, and maybe that's why they've stopped moving. I can only guess at this moment. And welcome back. I've cancelled that mission and come out of the campaign. That was as much to show you, and it was a bit incomplete, but it was to show you what the problems are with the current campaign, with the current build. This is dev build, this is not the live stable build, this is dev build, and why there won't be any campaign until they're solved. One will be that the enemy factions have to be all rebuilt to allow for exactly the problem we just saw, where they're running out of resources, so they can no longer fire until they've all been updated with new resource blocks, some way of moving resources around. So that's one reason why, you know, we might not see an update for a little while to bring this all in, because there's quite a lot of work for all of these model makers to do, redoing all of the ships in the various factions. Also, from my own side, we've got to do a fair bit of work on revamping all of the existing ships to ensure that they have a way of having some resources to produce metal, to produce ammo from metal, and also spares to do the repairs, etc. They will share them in their group, and I'm going to go through what I'm going to have to do in some cases to do this. But the more interesting side we're going to have to work on is we're going to have to look at these resource points and how the materials are moved between the various positions. Because although I showed you that the resources were sort of being dumped locally and being taken from the central pot, I created that one with 1.7 million, and it was creating it from the central pot. If you came to build a ship on, say, one of those resource points, unless those resource points were actually in that zone, you would not be able to build anything. I've said about that before, and this includes drones. If a drone is on a sub-spawner vehicle, you're okay, but if you're using a spawner, so it actually builds it as it requires it. Like, as an example, I have my air carrier, my the sea carrier, which spawns in aircraft depending upon what the enemy are around us. They actually now need to put on some resource containers on those to have enough resources to contain all of the various items. So so there's quite a bit of work to be done. Now, one thing I wanted to go through, which I didn't really go through on the last time, was these resource containers a little bit better. Because one thing I didn't say about was the amount of content there is in them. And there is a particular item to be careful of. The natural resource container, if we plonk one down, gives 10,000 units. And that's the same for all of them. All of the small storage containers each contain 10,000 per block. So this oil container actually contains 20,000 because it's 2 blocks worth. Same with the scrap. 20,000, and the crystal 20,000, and whoops, let's put the metal one down just to show that one. So we got 10,000, 10,000, 20, 20, 20. So if I just put one on the top of each of these, you'll notice they've all gone through 20,000. So they're 20,000 each, so it's 10,000 per block. And quite simply, the large block is the same ratio. So large natural is going to add 80,000 to this, so we have the 20,000 from these two, and then 8 blocks, so that's another 80,000, so we are up to 10,000, or say 100,000. Same with the metal, so it's still the same ratio. Now, one block that is not into that ratio, and I'm just going to take that one out just to show you, is the miscellaneous storage. Now, the miscellaneous storage, when I put that down, and I'm going to let these just fill up just to show you, we're just a bit filled up, natural's almost there. When we put this miscellaneous down, you'll notice every one of them went up just by 1,000. And contrary to what I had said in the previous video, it just adds 1,000 of everything. It doesn't fill up as something becomes available. It doesn't give it's not a contain anything block. My mistake, I misread the figures and didn't work with a system where everything was already filled up, so I'm wrong on that. So basically this only adds 5,000 resources per block. Now, where it is handy, these are going to be handy because basically, just to give you something in every ship, you could put one of these blocks in each of your ships, which is what I might do, and that gives you a little bit of everything in your ship. It'll give you basically 1,000 of everything in your ship ready to do rebuilds. So these miscellaneous blocks are very handy in that they, instead of having to find room for at minimum, you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 blocks of room you need to find to fit those in. Although it's a good amount of values, you can just put one of these blocks in and it gives you a little bit of everything. So any ship we build will have one of these blocks from now on, and I'm going to have to update all of my existing ships to at least have one of these, and if they're a spawning vehicle to then have more of the ice. But it's not very space efficient. Just to show, the large one is the same. If I add that in, I'll take these out just so that we can see they were at 20,000 and it's gone to 28,000. So it's basically added 1,000 per block. So you could fit one of these blocks in, which gives you a good 8,000 of each resource, which it can be pulling in from somewhere. So that's the one change I wanted to say over my previous video, is the amount that's in each resource and the miscellaneous storage. I was wrong on how that works, but it is also a very useful block, as I say, for all your small craft, and just make sure that you just put one of these in everything and I think you'll be sorted. Okay, now plans next for myself. Now that I've gone through basically some of the changes that's happening in the campaign and how the local resources are coming out in the campaign, I think it's good. It is interesting. There's still a little bit of work. The latest dev build that I'm running here does also have new petrol engines, which are very alpha, and I'm not even going to start going through those until I think there's been a patch or two on them, because it's not fair to start talking about those because they are just too far behind at this moment. So my choices are at the moment, the other bit I'm going to be working on is some, it looks like we will need some transport vehicles of some description to move the resources into and with the battleships, with the battle fleets. They might not need to collect, but I'm thinking we may have to collect resources from the various resource points and move them forwards. That's my view at that moment. And to have a bit of fun, what we're going to do, or what I am going to build, is a new fort. Obviously, we need a new resource collector that can store lots of resources for use, for building and for collection. So it's going to have some good storage capacity in each of our zones. It's also going to have to, as we saw in the campaign, we saw the Steel Striders were coming down for an attack on our rear resource points. So they will need to be able to defend themselves in some way. So I'm going to build possibly an upgradable 3-level. So start at, say, a very basic resource fort, which is for maybe the starting point, which has got some armament but is basically a quick build, just to do a little bit of resource, or it's a small resource point where maybe it's only got crystal or something like that. So it's not very valuable, got a little bit of defense but not too much. So when I have one unit doing that, then there's a way to upgrade it to a level 2, which is maybe slightly more resources, a bit more defense, and then you're finally your level 3, which is your rear echelon, very big, lots of resources, possibly even with the fuel refinery as well on board, and just put that as our level 3 fort. So that's one thing I'm going to be working on, I think, next, and just see what ideas we come up with. And then then there will be resource vehicles. Now these are the vehicles which will move the resources around and potentially stay with the fleet until their resources are used up. Now I've got a couple of ideas there. One is to have basically two types or two scales of resource ships. The first will be transports. Now transports simply move the large and quantities of material from one position to another, and they're going to be fastish. The main bit is to be resource efficient, so generally we don't want to make them too large. Well, large is good, but too fuel inefficient. We want to make them efficient at moving the goods around, does it at a reasonable pace, but not too fast. It's sending large quantities to a distribution point. We'll then need possibly smaller armoured resource carrier which stick with the actual fleet, and then will give their resources out to the ships so they can repair themselves. And then finally we're going to have our emergency resource carrier, which is generally going to be an aircraft. An aircraft to basically rush resources from a rear echelon up to the front because we need some quick repairs or building required, or a resupply. So they're going to be less efficient, but their main item is going to be quick. Move everything up quickly to the front line, so to speak. And that's the plan at this moment of what I'm going to start building and putting into place. Won't be using the... well, I will be starting to plan for the new style of engine, but potentially these will start with the standard engine and get retrofitted later. But the space required for the new engines will be a little bit larger, so I'm going to make these engines a little larger than they need to be at the beginning, with the idea that they'll be retrofitted for the new fuel engines later on, which might need a little bit more space to be efficient. We'll see how that goes. So that's the update. So this is sort of like, as much as anything, a campaign update of what's going on. And regarding the subscriberships for our fleet, I am still gathering them all into a nice little fleet, but as I've described with our own ships, I'm having to go through either the creators are making modifications hopefully to them, and we'll do an update before we bring them into the campaign afresh, and also I'm going to be going through myself and just making sure that they have some extra blocks in there to allow them to do the various repairs and resources for the new design, etc. And we'll get back into them as soon as we can, not in designer but actually in the proper game. So finally, apologies then for not bringing more campaign updates. It's going to be more building, and I'm sorry about that, but I'd like to do some more campaign. But I want to do with these resources and the new engines. I don't want to go... I could go back to the previous stable build, which is potentially possible, and maybe see what people think. I can load up on another machine a stable build, forget about the dev, load everything back in, but some of the weapons, that's got its own little problems, but at least it's a known set of problems. Or we can wait for all of this nice new stuff to come into play, and let's just get it fixed. It's only this resources, and then we should be back into playing and the campaign and finish off the campaign. And finally, the other option is to start again from scratch. But again, if I was starting from scratch, I would want to start with all of these new items in the game, so we can start with advanced cannons, and we can start with the local resources from the very beginning, which I eventually will do, but I want to get it to and at that point I might work with a slightly more stable build once everything is in play. So sorry for the update. Hopefully you're interested in what's happening with this the campaign development and what's happening in the game, and you're seeing the possibilities of where they're heading for. It is taking a little bit of time, but you can tell there is also a lot of things they've got to do here. It's not just a matter of quickly adding a function in. He's now also having to put a lot more detail into other areas of the game. Sorry about that. I was just looking for an item which I realised I can't see because I'm not in the campaign mode. But if you go into diplomacy in campaign mode, there's a whole new set of settings where we might see faction warfare actually running, rather than at the moment they don't actually attack each other. So we're going to have to look into that. That's a possibility. Sorry about that. I was looking. What I was saying is there's a lot of things they have to get working to get all of these changes out, because it's a significant game change that's gone through here. So anyway, let me know what you think. Should I just go back a build and carry on? Should we push forward and wait for the local resources and the engines to be finished and get that sorted? Or are you happy, which I am at the moment, is to carry on building things, and I'll build things with all of the new items taken into account, ready for when we have the build completed and we can carry on with the campaign. So anyway, until next time, leave your comments down below as always, and leave a like, because it's nice to be liked, because otherwise people don't like you, and I like to be liked. Don't we all like to be liked? Anyway, till next time, have fun.